Hello, once again, this is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents. Ways to follow the show is latenightparents.com. It's the MLK weekend, the pre-weekend. Lots going on here. We're recording this show a few days before, because we're taking some time out with our families and all of the above. But big shout out to Rich Valdez, who's always there when we do the live show, but he's not there tonight. A good friend, none other than Shawn Armor, is here in the building right now. Well, virtually in the building. Shawn, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. So
when I say
Shawn,
you guys, I mean you and all your listeners.
Yeah. Sean gonna be. You can follow him on Twitter, true_armor, TRU_ARMOR. Always good to have a friend in the room. Do some housekeeping really quick. Want to shout out our affiliates that play the show. We want to say thank you to the people who listen to the podcast. We want to say thank you, and thank you for downloading the podcast. Big shout out to our home station, 1240 AM WGBB, Long Island, New York, Merrick, New York, not too far from home. Shawn, since the last time we talked, it was pre-2019. You had dropped some jewels on me. I just want to let you know that we were talking resolutions and everything else like that. I recorded a couple of other pods leading up to the new year. And I want to let you know I've added vegetables to the daily intake. Feeling a lot better, feeling energized, not feeling sluggish. I want to say thank you, my friend.
Oh, I'm happy to help.
Big shout out to our friends from the 40-day turn-up, where we'll be posting some of this stuff in the coming, in the next, I would say, 2 weeks or so on the website, latenightparents.com. Meal guidelines.
Nice. That's super helpful.
Just to help people out there, because I'm telling you, just the overall consumption of fast food and processed foods and everything else like that.
Right.
There was a women's group that was that is involved in this 40-day turn-up. I happen to be helping support the women's group because they needed an AV tech,
right,
to set up the stuff. So I was there and I was able to grab some of the literature. So really happy about that. So we're going to go.
Yeah, good practices have no gender. So
that's
true.
Good
job.
True. It was a Saturday morning. It was 9 a.m. I was told what assignment I was covering. I covered the assignment and was able to pull some jewels, and I tied what you had told me along with some of these other people had told me. And I said, okay, it's time to change it up because approaching 50 closely, it gets closer and closer by the day.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to let everyone know today's show, it's a hybrid show, a little bit of live, and we have some recorded. Segment 1 is from Shawn Armor. We're going to talk a little politics as usual. Second segment is going to be Susan Pepka, the author of Gus Fortunate Misfortune. Susan takes the young readers on an exciting journey as they follow an ordinary mouse named Gus on a quest to find a way to turn his very bad day into a hopeful new beginning. And then in segment 3, I have a tribute I did last year to Dr. King, how Dr. King would see today's politics,
development,
today's world.
Right.
So I have a brief interpretation of that. But let's get into it, Shawn. As usual, always happy to have you. Dude, there's a couple of things going on. I think the last time we talked, there was a shutdown. Dude,
yeah.
It's still shut down. I would love to hear your take. I'm just going to say this much. At this point, all I care about are the government workers that aren't paid and the Coast Guard that's not paid. I'm hoping there can be some type of resolution for them.
Yeah, but, here's, like I mentioned the last time on your show, this is America. No one should be working for free. You know what I mean?
No.
So you furlough people, and then it gets bad at the highest levels. So then they order you back to work for free. It's so ridiculously un-American. No one should be for that. And there should be a ladder. They shouldn't be able to sit like stubborn children, with their arms folded on different sides of the room, right? There should be a ladder. Like, I don't know if you play video games, but I play Fortnite. Everybody plays Fortnite. And the thing about Fortnite is if it was a battle royale and you could just hang out wherever you were, nothing would ever get done, and that's what's going on, right? So we need the equivalent of the shrinking circle, which pushes people together, which forces engagement, right? So you will eventually get down to, out of 100 people, the battle royale winner, right? The one guy, because that circle will eventually shrink down to 3 feet, and you have to be in it or you die outside of it. And this is where we are with this shutdown. The people in power aren't feeling this. They're still getting checks and superb health care and, the best protection from our armed forces, as well as, the civilian men and women, Secret Service, FBI, U.S. Marshals, all those people doing at that level, they are the AAA specialists. They're losing nothing. Meanwhile, you have people who work in, like, the U.S. parks who, could very well be your neighbor because there are parks in New York City, right? The Ashland Memorial is a federal park down there. I'm about to say Chambers Street, but it's not. It's I forgot what street it's on, but in Lower Manhattan. So from there to the people who take care of the grounds of the fort under the Golden Gate Bridge out in California, it's just wrong on so many levels. And I think it's going to have serious implications down the road for the election. I don't see how either one of these people, because Nancy Pelosi has issues already, so that shows cracks in the Democratic Party. And the Republicans are just going along to get along, and that looks bad as well. I think Steve King was a really good distraction for them because they didn't have to talk about this thing, and they got to condemn Steve King for racial statements. Like, what did he say? What's so wrong about being a white supremacist? When did that get a bad name?
Yeah, a white nationalist. But this isn't the first time with Steve King.
No, it isn't.
This is the norm.
Yeah.
So tell me this. Tell me your take on. With it being MLK weekend,
right?
And this type of talk, why wasn't he censured?
Well, they look at censure as a big deal, like a serious deal. So they'd rather just go out in front of the press corps and go, climb out on that limb and say that racism is bad. Who's going to be out there going, yeah, I totally agree with Steve King. Nobody. So everybody gets to grandstand these messages and do nothing. And this is essentially what that place has become. They've been kicking cans down the road and, avoiding the real issues, and here we are, a government shutdown. So, and while that's going on, you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You can't handle Steve King, who obviously should not be in Congress, right? His views are antithetical to what we as modern Americans are looking for, right? I mean, we stand against it. Like this Charlottesville thing with their march, and, you get to say it, but the vast majority of Americans are not for this nonsense. And here we are. And it serves as a distraction. And meanwhile, this government shutdown is going to really mess with people's lives. I mean, people have to pay rent. And
people have to pay rent. I mean, I think we talked about last time. I think I pulled some information from the Pew Research Center, and it said 68% of Americans, I forgot the age bracket.
Right.
So I don't know if it was 25 to 54 or, 35 and above, but it stated that 68% of Americans have less than $500 in the bank. So we are a world that is living check to check.
And it creeps into your love life too, because when money becomes a problem in relationships break up, and then people, it's a relationship killer. If it's one more thing that the average couple, doesn't need. If you're a 2-income household and all of a sudden you're a 1-income household, and there were problems before, so all these repercussions. Yeah, exactly. So all these things echo, sort of like ripples out into all aspects of your life, and the people who really cause you these problems are gonna, they're not even gonna handle Stephen King. They're gonna grandstand around saying how bad what he said is. We're sort of talking about two topics now. About what he said was, while they could censure him and, in this shutdown and put people back to work, and people are not going to get reimbursed money or time or any of this, and you're ordering people back to work for free. You know what I mean? That just sounds like what the communists would do if you really want to get into it. I mean, capitalism is what we're founded on, and that means a day's work for a day's pay. So if they're calling you in, how are they not paying you?
I don't know.
I think
And good evening once again. This is Late Night Parents. This is Ted Hicks. Ways to follow the show, latenightparents.com, where you'll find our latest blogs, wikis, archive of podcasts. We have over 300 episodes available. How about that? Also, you'll be able to find, if you want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, I guess we'll put up an Instagram widget so that if you want to click like or follow or friend or all the above. We want to thank, before we have our guest of the evening, it's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. We're leading into the holiday. We want to thank all of our affiliates that air the show, but specifically 1240 AM WGBB, also 95.9 FM. We want to say thank you guys for always supporting the show, and for all the people that do write us on Facebook. We don't get back to everyone, and most of the people that know how to contact us on Twitter, I'm a little bit more active there. So with all of that, all the housekeeping is out of the way, our featured guest for the evening is the author of Gus's Fortunate Misfortune. And The author of the book is none other than Susan Pepka, and Susan is a native of Detroit, currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. She enjoys great diversity throughout her life. She's a mother of 3, grandmother of 4, and Susan has experienced life as a preschool teacher, a technologist in diagnostic imaging, and the co-owner of a successful wellness center, mediation teacher, and now a published author with the debut of her first book, Gus's Fortunate Misfortune. Susan, how are you doing?
I'm really well, Ted. Thank you.
So excited. Thank you for taking the time out this evening to talk with us. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but I got to tell you, I got to thank the good people at Smith Publicity. They were able to share your book, your new book, and I tell you, while I did not get a chance to read it to my son last night, I read it myself, and I was my wife was asleep. She was half asleep. I'm reading the book. She's like, "What's going on here?" She's also an educator. She's asking me whether or not, oh, hey, I can share it with some teachers at school. I said, yes, you can, but you can't have the book quite yet. But so I guess we'll get into your inspiration for writing your book.
Well, most people don't know this, but the book's based on a true story. So it was inspired, it was inspired by real events. Back in 2013, I was at a Buddhist retreat, and the teacher told a story about an experience he'd had with a little mouse at the temple, and I was so delighted by the story, and I just kept trying to imagine what it would be like from the mouse's point of view. So that's how the story came into being.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, the excitement about the release of your new book. Did you? I guess we'll go into a little bit of inside baseball, and I'll ask you a question like, how hard was the process to get this book published, Susan?
Well, it was just very long and lots of obstacles, it seemed like. I started writing the story in January of 2014, and it was just released last November. So I don't know that it was so hard to do it, as it just required a lot of patience and just allowing the process to take whatever time it was going to take. We was writing the story, doing some editing, then turning it over to the illustrator, who is amazing, by the way. I just cannot believe my great good fortune at getting Joseph Cowman to be able to do the drawings, but then allowing him the time he needed to do, and then more editing. And there was actually one point in the writing of it that I realized that the drawings didn't quite go with the story, and I didn't know if we needed to have the illustrations changed or the story changed, but it ended up being easier to adjust the story to it. So Gus had an extra obstacle in there he had to overcome, and in the long run, I think it actually made the story better.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm glad you had already answered my next question. What was the biggest obstacle that you encountered, but you explained that. Hey, I wanted to, the book itself is inspirational and charming. I wanted to know if you could describe the way in which we face challenging circumstances that define us.
Wow. Yeah. So sometimes we encounter challenges and we can have them, sometimes we'll respond in a negative way, right? We'll become hard-hearted or bitter or angry or discouraged. That's a big one, is discouragement in the face of obstacles. But when we look at things in a different way, we can look at things as opportunities to learn and to grow and to stretch. And I think those very obstacles are what can help us to attain a higher level if we choose to use them that way.
Susan, we're speaking with Susan Pepka, of the author of Gus's Fortunate Misfortune. Susan, your book touched upon kind of the effects of bullying on a child's confidence.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that we could restore the self-worth by conquering adversity?
It's interesting. Conquering adversity. I don't know that that's a term I would use. I would say transforming adversity.
Okay.
But yeah, when kids are faced with those difficult situations, I think especially with kids, they need adults in their life who have created such a safe space for them so that even when they encounter those times when kids pick on them, call them names, tease them, whatever form the bullying takes, if the adults in children's lives can create such a safety net for them that they won't go under, that the kids will know that they have a safe space. That's really what Gus is looking for on his adventures in the story. He's really wanting that safe space, which I don't know if I should give away the ending, but but I think it's so important for kids to feel cherished and protected. And so I think that's how we can help kids, how the adults in kids' lives can help them, is by creating that safe space.
Now, I guess it's safe to assume, but, my mom and dad always told me to never assume when I was a young child that Gus's Fortunate Misfortune is about Gus. But I got to tell you, tell me the inspiration behind Jamyang, the Buddhist monk.
The monk, yeah. Well, so I heard the story from a monk, actually. And so the inspiration for Jamyang is the monk, whose real name is Genjampa. But so he pretty much is, in the story, is how he was or is in real life. Yeah, very kind, very compassionate, a wonderful teacher, and so what else can I tell you about him?
I don't want you to tell us too much because I want people to go out there and purchase this book. Could you tell us before we start to wrap up, the importance of community in our lives.
Oh, well, we need one another. I believe wholeheartedly that we depend on one another. I can't do it without you. And I can't do it without any other person who's out here. And so community is just so important. And trying to think how I want to say it. I can't accomplish the things that I need to accomplish without others. And I think it's reciprocated everywhere. What comes to mind thinking of how to answer this question is that when I was at one point in the writing of the story, I was kind of blocked and stuck, and there were so many other things going on in my life at the time. And one morning as I was getting ready for the day, the thought came to me that I needed to write this story not for me, but I needed to write this story because there's an illustrator out there somewhere who is just waiting for this story so he can create the artwork. And there are librarians out there who are waiting for the story. There are teachers out there waiting for the story. There are parents and there are kids and people waiting for this story. And our lives are just sort of interconnected. And so we need to create harmonious communities. We need to learn to cherish one another. We need to be kind to one another because our society depends on it. And we see so much divisiveness. We see hatred. We see people thinking that they're better than others, their happiness is more important than the happiness of others. And I'm hoping that we can get to a place where we realize that those ways of thinking are not beneficial and we need to learn to cherish one another. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it totally answers my question. We're speaking with Susan Pepka, the author of Gus's Fortunate Misfortune. Susan, I'm going to go a little off topic for a second.
Okay.
Of all the things that you have done and your accomplishments and accolades, would you share with us that you're the co-owner of a successful wellness center? Would you share with us what moved you in that direction to start up a wellness center, and where is it? Kind of,
Well, it's funny because since the writing of that, I've actually semi-retired from that. So I am still very much involved in the wellness community, but I'm not a co-owner anymore. So it gives me more time for other things. But since the time I was a child, I've always been interested in helping people or helping animals. And so I, at one time, aspired to go into medicine, to go into nursing. I didn't actually do that after I married and had children. Then more practical things came to mind. So my degrees are in nuclear medicine and X-ray technology, but I've always been interested in health and wellness, and the opportunity came up back in, I think, 2005 for me to work at a wellness center, and 3 years into that, the owner wanted to retire, so she offered me and another person if we wanted to purchase the business. So that's how I got involved in that. But, it's just it's just one of the things I need to do is to help people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I do want to mention that within the book, the tone of the book, when we were, as I was reading last night, and I was seeing Gus's adventure, we all face fears from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what our reactions to fear can do.
Our reaction to fear, if we're not careful, it can paralyze us and stop us. But if we with wisdom understand that, so there's some fears that we just need to be really mindful of, like putting your hand on a hot burner or running into a busy street, right? You know, some of those fears just help us to survive in this world. But other fears are irrational, and we can respond to those fears by understanding that they're irrational. And in the case of kids, it is important to have adults in their lives who can help them to work through that. But looking at your fears, understanding that this fear is an irrational fear and it's paralyzing me, and I don't need to be paralyzed. I just need to find a way to work through this fear so that I can move forward, right? Yeah. I hope that if that answers your question.
Oh, yes, it does. I just want to tell you, your book, it's going to take young readers because, we want to create and generate as many young readers. But I will tell you, I might not be a youngster, but you took me through a journey, which is pretty exciting. And it kind of took me, and I followed Gus on his quest to find his way to turn that very bad day into a hopeful new beginning. So I definitely want to thank you for, taking the time out for this evening. Want to know best ways to find your book.
Well, the book is available.
Okay.
Yes, the book's available on Amazon. And right now that's probably the best way to get a copy of the book. I will be doing book signings, but unless someone's coming to Woodstock, Georgia on March 3rd, Amazon is probably the best place. Yeah. Gotcha.
Is it, and also, I think my next to last question was going to be, if our listeners wanted to interact with you via social media, what would be the best way be to
right
try
now,
to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best place right now is through Gus's Facebook page.
Okay.
Gus's Fortunate Misfortune. And I love it when people send messages, and I will do my very best to respond. I did want to say one thing that you, when you said that you enjoyed the story, the book is a children's book. There's no doubt about that, but it's a book for everybody.
Right.
Yeah. A friend of mine, when she was helping me with the editing, and after she read it, she came to me and she said, Sue, it's really not a kid's book.
Susan,
and go ahead.
I got to jump in here and tell you, I second what your buddy was saying, because I said those are some real world issues that Gus is dealing with.
Yeah. And that's what I want people to realize. I mean, my vision is for parents to benefit as much from sharing Gus with their children as the children do. Because ultimately, if we want to foster kindness and compassion in our children, we need to find a way to create that in our own lives.
Lastly, I do want to mention the cover and the interior illustration by Joseph Kalman was excellent. I was sending a few screenshots to a couple of my friends. I said, "Hey, I got an interview. I got to do this. I got to do some homework." And one of my buddies said, "Well, you know, send me a screenshot of what the book looks like." And I sent them the external, the cover, and also the picture of Jan Yang. And they were like, "Wow, that art is pretty darn good. I tell you that much."
It was beyond my imagining. I kind of still have to wake myself up from my good fortune of having Joseph be able to do the illustrations. The book itself just came out so much better than I could have ever even imagined. And my publisher, Nabila Khashoggi, with Full Cycle Publications, she was the one who connected us, and just an amazing blessing.
Definitely. I do want to say thanks again, not only to you, Susan Pepka. I want to say thank you to our friends at Smith Publicity for allowing this, or affording this to happen, to be able to connect the two of us together. It's been a total fortune. I feel I'm the one that's fortunate to receive Gus's fortunate misfortune and also to speak with you. I guess the last question I'm going to have is there going to be a series of books? Is there going to be a sequel? Are you thinking about that already? Or are you going to go in another direction? Or you're just okay with this for right now?
No, I am intending to create a series.
Okay.
And, so the story for the next Gus book is percolating. And I just need to get it on paper and get it going. But
Gotcha.
Definitely.
Well, when you do start thinking about putting the book together, or you need any early adopters, early readers, you definitely give the good folks at Good Late Night Parents a call or a text message, or I will, right after this call, I will like your Facebook page so that I can definitely follow your journey. Want to thank you once again, Susan Pepka, the author of Gus's Fortunate Misfortune, for taking the time out tonight. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Ted. It's really been delightful.
Take care.
You too.
Welcome again to Late Night Parents. This is Ted Hicks. Ways to follow the podcast, latenightparents.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, The Real Ted Hicks. Ways Dr. King speaks to us today. Every hero becomes a bore at last. That's the famous line from the 19th century philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. But it could also apply to a modern American hero, the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. As the nation celebrates King's national holiday, it's easy to freeze frame him as the benevolent dreamer carved in stone on the Washington Mall. Yet the platitudes that frame
many of King's holiday events fail to mention the most radical aspects of his legacy. We turn him into a Thanksgiving float. He's jolly, he's larger than life, he makes us feel good. We've turned him into a mascot. Many people vaguely know Dr. King opposed the Vietnam War and talked more about poverty in his later years. But King also had a lot to say about the issues not normally associated with civil rights that still resonate today, historians and activists say. If you're concerned with health care, climate change, inequality, or even the nastiness of our political disagreements, then King has plenty to say to you. To see that version of Dr. King, though, we might have to dust off the cliches and look at him anew. If you're more familiar with your smartphone than your history, try this. Think of King not just as a civil rights hero, but as an app. His legacy needs to be updated to remain relevant. Here are 3 ways that we can update our MLK app to see how he spoke not only to his time, but to our time as well. Number 1, he's an environmental hero. When former Attorney General Eric Holder spoke at the King commemorative event in 2011, he described King in an unusual way. King, he said, helped plant the seeds of what would become our nation's now thriving environmental justice movement. People don't think of King as an ecological activist. He didn't live long enough to see the environmental movement take off. He died just a few months before the Apollo 8 astronauts took the iconic Earthrise photo over the moon, which is often credited with sparking widespread environmental awareness. But he still inspires environmental activists because they say he was so eloquently and articulating a core belief of their movement, the interconnected nature of life. One of the most difficult challenges climate change activists face today is convincing political and business leaders to act on behalf of future generations of people in other parts of the world. King, though, offered a great example of how to address this challenge, some say. He constantly talked about the interconnectedness of life. In his A Christmas Sermon on Peace, just 5 months before his assassination, King delivered one of his most famous quotes. All life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Some even describe Dr. King as an ecological hero. Activist and author Drew Dillinger says King's insight is profound. That's the essence of ecology. The first law of ecology is that everything is connected. Other environmental activists noticed Dr. King as well. In his essay, Dillinger cites Larry L. Rasmussen, the author of Earth Honoring Faith, describing King as one of the great ecological thinkers of the 20th century. King wrote more about nature and how fragile life is on Earth than we realize. King once warned that cities are gasping in polluted air and enduring contaminated water. Dillinger also cites this quote from King. It would be foolhardy for me to work for integrated schools or integrated lunch counters and not be concerned about the survival of the world in which to be integrated. When he was pouring through King's sermons and books, Dillinger says he discovered constant references to science and nature. He came across note cards written in King's hand rhapsodizing about all this galaxy of wonder and the stars that guide sailors in storms. There's a connection between what Dr. King was saying in the 1950s and 60s and the explosion of ecological thinking that emerged around 1970, where everyone was saying it's all about interconnectedness. Gwen Keyes Fleming, a former EPA regional administrator, wrote about Dr. King's environmental legacy. Says Dr. King inspired a generation of activists in the 1970s and 80s who fought more to remove landfills than had been placed in or near communities of color. If you go back to the beginnings of the environmental justice movement, a lot of these folks were active civil rights advocates at the time. Even Congressman John Lewis said that environmental justice is one of the modern civil issues of our time. Number 2, Dr. King was a socialist before it was cool. There was a time in American politics when calling someone a socialist was a slur. Not anymore for many younger Americans who are developing a distrust of capitalism. One of the most popular politicians in recent times is Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist who almost captured the Democratic nomination for president. And a 2016 Harvard University poll says 51% of young Americans aged 18 to 29 oppose capitalism. And a poll conducted by the next year by YouGov and the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation found that most American millennials prefer to live in a socialist country than a capitalistic one. The reasons why some millennials prefer socialism have been documented. Lingering scars from the Great Recession, staggering student debt, the greatest economic inequalities since before the Great Depression have all contributed to an unease about capitalism. Dr. King has similar misgivings. Many historians describe him as a democratic socialist, someone who, according to the Democratic Socialists of America, believes the economy should be shaped to meet public needs and not to make profits for a few. Dr. King called for universal health care and education, a guaranteed annual income, and nationalization of some industries. He was a big supporter of unions, and while there was no fight for 15 to raise the minimum wage during this time, he once said that even menial workers should make enough so they can live and educate their children and buy a home and have the basic necessities of life. When Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, he was about to lead a multiracial army of poor people into Washington to force the nation's political leaders to address poverty. He saw that changing the laws was important, but that was not itself sufficient. There, he had to be a sort of redistribution of economic power. How radical was Dr. King's vision? He spelled it out on many occasions. In 1968, he told the church audience, it didn't cost the nation a penny to open lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation a penny to give us the right to vote. But it cost the nation billions to feed and house all of its citizens. The country needs a radical redistribution of wealth. In a 1966 speech to his staff, Dr. King said, there must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move towards democratic socialism. In 1964, after traveling to Norway to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King said, in both Norway and Sweden, whose economies are literally dwarfed by the size of our influence and extent of our technology, they have no unemployment and no slums. There, men, women, and children have long enjoyed free medical care and quality education. This is a contrast to the limited halting steps taken by our rich nation that deeply troubled him. Even one of those utopian visions, a guaranteed income, is getting serious discussion today because of the fears that automation will erase many jobs. There's even a new proposal to give every newborn in the U.S. baby bonds, accounts between $550,000 that parents couldn't touch until their kids turn 18, as a way to combat the inequalities that we deal with today. There are those who say King gravitated toward socialism later in his life, but many Americans today said he saw its possibilities first as a young man. In a letter to his future wife, Coretta, at 20-something, King wrote, "I imagine you already know that I am much more socialistic in my economic theory about capitalistic. So today, capitalism has outlived its usefulness, and it has brought about a system that takes the necessities from the masses and gives luxury to the classes." Number 3, Dr. King never let a political disagreement turn nasty. Reverend Dr. Chicken Wing, a religious Uncle Tom, a traitor, and a chump. That's how one prominent black leader described Dr. King when he was alive. That leader was Malcolm X. While his denunciations of Dr. King and other leaders is well known, here's a remarkable fact. There is virtually no record of Dr. King making a personal or petty attack against Malcolm X or any other black leader who criticized him. This could be an important lesson at a time of bitter political divisions, which are often made worse by social media. 2 contemporary leaders in the civil rights movement recently got into a Twitter feud and that turned personal. The clash between Cornel West and Ta-Nehisi Coates revolved around political philosophy, but it became so heated that Coates ended up deleting his Twitter account. King received a cascade of petty insults from Malcolm X and other black leaders during his time, but King's faith tempered his response. He was a Christian minister, and he talked about trying to love segregationalists, and if you have empathy for your enemies, you can also do that with your rivals in civil rights organizations. There was also a pragmatic side of King's reluctance to get pulled into public feuds. It preserved alliances and kept the doors open to new allies, including Malcolm X. After Malcolm X broke with the Nation of Islam in 1964, he started reaching out to King and other civil rights leaders. He traveled to Selma, Alabama in 1965, where King was leading a march to Montgomery to offer support. A friend of Malcolm once said that the former Nation of Islam leader believed King was the most responsive of all the civil rights leaders to his efforts to reconcile. He had come to believe that Dr. King believed in what he was doing. He believed in nonviolence, and it wasn't just a show. He developed respect for him and heard that you have to give respect to men to put their lives on the line. The respect was mutual. When Dr. King later learned that Malcolm X had come to Selma to support him, he was quoted as saying, "Hey, Malcolm's a beautiful brother." He always had a deep affection for Malcolm. Malcolm X obviously, challenged and did say many unkind words about Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence, but their disagreements never turned personal or nasty. King's nature didn't just help him deal with other black leaders' insults. It also helped him deal with something people today may find harder to believe. He was persistently unpopular during his lifetime. One of the things that the people erase from history is how unpopular and scared of Dr. King most Americans were during his time. I'm not just talking about in 67, 68. I'm talking about in the early 60s. The 1963 March on Washington and his I Have a Dream speech, polls show that most Americans did not approve of the march, and the following year, well before the 1965 Voting Rights Act was passed, a New York Times poll showed that most Americans thought the civil rights movement had gone too far. The U.S. government thought Dr. King was so dangerous, they treated him like an enemy of the state. We now see his March on Washington speech as the greatest American speech of the 20th century. But we're uncomfortable grappling with the fact that this is a moment that the FBI decided to have wall-to-wall surveillance of Dr. King. Today we have wall-to-wall celebrations about Dr. King. He is now on par with American titans like Presidents George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Americans write tributes and sing songs of how much Dr. King changed America. But here's one more uncomfortable thought that's always, that also explains why Dr. King remains so relevant. The country is still divided by the same issues that consumed him. On his last night of his life, Dr. King told a shouting congregation of black churchgoers that we as a people, we get to the promised land. That kind of optimism, though, sounds like it belongs to another era. What we have now is a leader in the White House who denies widespread reports that he complained about Latino and African immigrants coming to S-hole countries, a white supremacist who murders worshipers in the church, a social media landscape that pulsates with anger and accusations. King's Promised Land doesn't sound boring when you compare to today's headlines, and maybe that's what's so sad about reliving his life every January for some people. 50 years after he died, Dr. King's vision of America still sounds so far away.
And now, an ad from Dad.
All right, save money on car insurance when you bundle home and auto with Progressive. Can I take these off? All right. What is this? This looks good. Wow, that's well made. Where did you get this? I'm talking to you with the hair. Yeah, where did you get this? It's good stuff. That's solid. That's not veneer. That's solid stuff.
Progressive can't save you from becoming your parents, but we can save you money when you bundle home and auto. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discounts not available in all states or situations.